Around 9 at night, I zipped my camera bag and checked my phone, already dreaming of bed, when my stomach dropped and stayed there hard. 11 missed calls from parking enforcement, plus one new message, told me my work van had been towed from the hotel loading zone tonight again. I had parked for 30 minutes, in theory, then shot 3 straight hours of corporate smiles and cake slices under ballroom lights without looking up. Outside the glass doors, the rain changed personalities, from drizzle to sheets, the kind that floods gutters and erases taxis like magic at once here. Lily tugged my jacket, her small hands cold through the fabric, and I hated that she knew my face so well by now too much. I counted the cash in my wallet twice, hoping it would multiply. $43 after rent, daycare, and a late electric bill this same rough week. The tow fee would be at least $200, plus storage, plus the ticket I deserved, and my next client might pay whenever they felt like. I told myself to breathe, to sound steady for my daughter, but my chest felt like a hand was closing around it slowly and meanly. Across the street, a café glowed warm and smug. Marble counters and pastries, the kind of place I usually walked past with my eyes down. But Lily shivered, and I chose comfort over pride, pushing the heavy door open and stepping into coffee-scented air for both of us tonight. Every table was packed with expensive coats and bright screens, and the noise hit me like a wave in my ears, all at the same. Lily pressed against my leg, overwhelmed, while I scanned for any empty chair, any kindness, any corner to hide in until the storm moved on. Near the back, one man sat alone, dark hair, still posture, an untouched espresso, and a newspaper in Italian folded like a knife beside him. When I approached, water dripping from my sleeves, I felt every inch of class difference, like it had a sound inside my own bones too. I asked for space without saying the desperate parts, and his gaze lifted, dark and steady, pinning my nerves to the table edge quietly there. He gave permission the way some men give orders, soft but final, and I sat before my pride could interrupt me again for once today. His attention flicked to Lily's wet curls and trembling shoulders, and something in his expression tightened, not unkindly, just sharp with purpose and focus always. With a small gesture, he summoned a waiter instantly, as if the room had been waiting for his hand to rise since before I arrived. Soon Lily had a hot chocolate crowned with marshmallows and a bowl of soup steaming, and she finally stopped shaking right in front of me. Relief flooded me so fast it hurt, followed by guilt that I needed a stranger's money to warm my child in a city this rich. He watched me the way a lens watches, calm and assessing, and I realized he had noticed my camera bag before I even sat down. Without asking outright, he let me know he'd seen the event upstairs, the kind of detail that felt impossible unless he was always paying attention. Then he produced one of my damp business cards, and I understood he had already searched my name while I was still counting pennies silently. He spoke about a family dinner needing candid photos, and the word family sounded heavier in his mouth, like it meant loyalty and rules too. He offered an advance so large my mind went blank for a second, because it solved tomorrow's disasters: tow fees, food, gas, and breathing room. Every warning I'd learned after Lily's dad left tried to rise up, but Lily was eating in peace, and I was so tired of fear. I agreed, telling myself it was business, nothing more, while my instincts argued that nothing was free in this kind of room with him watching. He took my number with precise movements, like everything in his life had a place and a plan, even people passing through for one night. He didn't ask for my banking details. He simply implied my website and payment portal were enough for him to reach me anytime he wanted. When we left, a black sedan waited at the curb, and Marcus held an umbrella, like he'd rehearsed it for this exact moment every day. I hesitated, remembering every safety rule, but Lily climbed in without fear, and Dante stood in the rain, patient as stone, until I followed her. The car smelled like leather and something woody, and the city blurred past while Dante sat beside me, silent as if silence was his language. At my building, he watched until I carried Lily inside, and that small, steady attention loosened a knot in me I didn't know I had. Later, after pajamas and bedtime kisses, I checked my phone again, expecting nothing, and saw the deposit notice sitting there like a door opening wide. The amount matched his promise, and my relief came tangled with a new question. Why would a man like him choose us in that storm? I fell asleep thinking tomorrow would show me his world, and that I might be standing on its edge when his driver came at 10. Morning light found my apartment before I was ready for it. I checked my phone with the same dread I used to reserve for overdraft alerts. And there it was, the deposit, cleared, exact, real. My first breath felt like release, my second like suspicion. Money never landed clean in my life. It usually arrived with a reminder, a fee, or a string. I watched Lily sleep, then promised myself I would stay professional, grateful and cautious. Tomorrow would show me what kind of man. By mid-morning, Lily bounced in her butterfly dress, insisting you dressed up for important houses, and my heart cracked at how easily she believed in magic. I chose black jeans and a plain sweater, the uniform of a woman trying not to look like she needed help. I packed lenses, batteries, and my best calm face. Every few minutes I glanced at the bank app again, half expecting the numbers to vanish. Around 10 in the morning, tires whispered outside and my stomach tightened again. Marcus Reed stepped from a black sedan like he belonged to the weather. Broad shoulders, quiet eyes, an umbrella already angled over the door. He greeted me with the kind of politeness that sounded practiced. Not fake, just trained. I noticed he kept his body between us and the street while he held the door for Lily first. Lily stared at him like he was a superhero, and I hated how comforted I felt. We left my building without neighbors even noticing. Anything had changed. The drive started with cracked sidewalks and corner stores, the Chicago I knew by smell and sound. Then block by block the city softened. Potholes disappeared. Trees lined streets like someone paid them to stand straight. Storefronts became boutiques with minimal signs and maximum glass. Lily pressed her face to the window, whispering to herself about castles, and I kept nodding like I wasn't scared. Marcus drove smoothly, eyes flicking to mirrors more often than normal drivers ever do, as if he expected trouble appear. We crossed into a suburb that felt edited, everything trimmed and quiet. Houses sat far back from the road behind iron fencing, each driveway long enough for a parade. Cameras perched on posts and eaves, tiny black eyes aimed outward. When we turned onto a private lane, a gate slid open before Marcus even stopped, like the property had recognized the car. Wealth was one thing. This was wealth that expected trouble and paid to see it coming. I swallowed and held Lily's hand tighter. At the end of the drive, the mansion rose in warm brick and pale stone, 3 stories of symmetry and confidence. It wasn't a fairy tale castle, but Lily's whole body leaned toward it like it might be. Dante waited at the front steps in dark slacks and a sweater that looked casual only if you ignored how perfectly it fit. He opened Lily's door himself, then mine, watching my face as if measuring what I could handle. I felt evaluated and protected at once there. Inside, the air smelled faintly like lemon polish and something older, like books that had been kept dry for generations. Hardwood floors shone under my shoes. Art hung with confident spacing, not crowded, as if each piece had earned its wall. Along the hallway, framed photos showed Dante as a teenager, then as a man, always serious, always watchful. As we walked, he kept pausing just a fraction, listening beyond the rooms, placing himself between us and every doorway without making it obvious to me. He led us into a sunroom where windows wrapped the space, pouring in morning light that made my photographer brain wake up despite everything. I could already see where I'd stand, where I'd catch faces without interrupting moments. Lily wandered to the glass, drawn by roses outside. In the garden, a woman in a cream dress trimmed stems with hands. When she looked up and saw Lily, she went still, shears hovering, one hand rising to her mouth as if she'd been struck by memory. Dante's voice softened, and I understood that was Teresa Moretti, his mother, even before she stepped inside. She moved fast, like the garden had pushed her toward us. Her smile began polite, then faltered as her eyes kept returning to Lily's face, searching for something. Lily, fearless, offered her hand the way she did with teachers and friendly cashiers, and Teresa's composure trembled. Teresa insisted we stay for lunch, not as a favor to us, but as something she needed. Throat tightened, but I nodded. I wanted to decline and retreat to my apartment where no one watched gates, but Lily looked up at Teresa with trust, and my defenses cracked again. Dante gestured us deeper into the house, and I followed because leaving felt ruder than fear, which is a terrible reason to stay. As we passed more family photos, I caught one frame of a little girl with light curls and a grin, and my stomach dropped. Lily didn't just remind Teresa of someone. Lily looked like her. By the time Teresa guided Lily toward the kitchen to help with napkins, my hands were already searching for my notebook like it was a life raft. If I could measure light and plan a shot list, I could pretend my heartbeat was normal. The sunroom's windows threw soft stripes across the floor, and I started mapping them in my head. Where the glare would land at dusk, where candles would reflect off glass, where faces would look gentle instead of tired. Dante walked me through the rooms with quiet efficiency. He pointed out where tables would go, where his mother wanted the cake, where guests would enter. I nodded, taking notes, letting the practical details keep my fear contained. Still, I noticed how he moved. He never stood with his back to a doorway. He paused at corners as if listening to the whole house at once. When a staff member crossed the hall, Dante's eyes tracked the movement automatically, then returned to me like nothing happened. From the kitchen came Lily's small laugh, and the sound loosened something in my chest. Teresa's voice followed, warm and steady, the kind of tone that makes children feel safe without explaining why. Every time I glanced that direction, I caught Teresa watching Lily like she was trying to memorize her. Not in a creepy way, in a desperate way, like a woman holding onto sunlight with both hands. We passed the hallway of photographs again, and this time Dante slowed, letting my gaze settle on the frame I had noticed earlier quietly. Dante didn't say her name out loud at first, but the heaviness in his silence did. When he finally explained, I understood Teresa's shock in the garden. The girl had been his niece, his mother's granddaughter, taken years ago in a way time hadn't softened. Lily didn't just resemble her. Lily echoed her. I wanted to apologize for existing in the wrong shape, for walking in with a child whose face reopened a family's oldest wound. But what came out in my head was simpler. Please, don't let that resemblance become a reason to keep us here. A crash cut through the house like a slap. Voices rose, one sharp with anger and one thick with something slurred. My mother instincts surged, hot and immediate. My mind stopped thinking about light and started thinking about Lily's small hands. I moved toward the kitchen without deciding to. In the dining room, Teresa stood rigidly between Lily and a man swaying in the doorway. He had Dante's dark hair and the same bones in his face, but softened, like the family's features had been poured into a younger mold and then left out in the rain. His eyes were bloodshot, his shirt was wrinkled. The smell of alcohol reached me before he did. He pointed, not quite steady. And the words spilling from him weren't really for me. They were for the room, for the ghosts he lived with. He accused Teresa of pretending, accused Dante of using Lily as a substitute, as if a child could be swapped in like a broken part. Lily pressed closer to Teresa's legs, confused by the tension, and my throat tightened with rage. My daughter was not a replacement. She was a whole person, a real little girl who deserved a life without being drafted into someone else's grief. Dante entered behind him, and the temperature changed. I didn't hear a threat. I heard certainty. Dante's posture went from host to something older and colder, the kind of control that doesn't need volume. Marcus appeared at Dante's shoulder as if he had been waiting in the walls. The drunk man's bravado faltered the moment he realized he was outnumbered by discipline. The scene ended quickly, not with shouting, but with decisions being enforced. The brother, Evan, was guided out, still muttering, still broken, and Teresa exhaled like she had been holding her breath for 10 years. Lily's eyes stayed wide, but Teresa smoothed her hair with hands that trembled. Afterward, we returned to the sunroom, pretending we were still planning a party. My pen shook as I wrote, and Dante's jaw flexed once, twice, like he was grinding down something dangerous inside himself. I felt pity for Evan for half a second, for the way grief can hollow a person out. Then I remembered Lily's frightened face, and the pity burned away. When Marcus later walked us toward the driveway, I saw men unloading sealed wooden crates from a truck near a side entrance. Dark stenciled markings cut across the boards in a language I didn't recognize. My eyes lingered too long, and Marcus shifted, blocking my view with a smooth step and a polite final stillness. I followed him toward the car, thinking I came here to take photographs, but I was starting to see the outline of something I shouldn't name yet. After we left the mansion, I told myself it was temporary. I would deliver the venue notes, shoot Teresa's birthday dinner, get paid, and disappear back into my small life. That plan sounded brave in my head, but it was really fear wearing mascara. I hated owing anyone, especially a man like Dante, whose kindness felt measured. Every time my phone buzzed, my shoulders tightened, expecting another favor that would become a debt. Lily, though, kept asking about the gardens. She said the roses smelled sweet, and I smiled, because her happiness felt like shelter. Teresa called on Saturday morning, and the way my name landed in her voice made refusal feel rude. She spoke about Sunday lunch as if it were weather, a fixed thing that happened whether I agreed or not. I tried to explain that I had editing to do, that Lily needed routines, that we could not keep dropping into their world. But Lily heard the invitation and lit up, begging with hopeful eyes. In the end, I said yes for my daughter, not for me. Sunday afternoon, Marcus drove us out past familiar brick flats and into a neighborhood that looked scrubbed clean. The Moretti gate opened without a pause, and we rolled up a curved drive lined with hedges trimmed like math. Music drifted from the backyard, bright and loud. And when we stepped through the side garden, I walked straight into organized chaos. A long patio table stretched under a canopy, already crowded with bowls, platters and bottles sweating in the sun. Voices overlapped in Italian and English, hands waving, cousins greeting cousins. I stood still for a second, feeling like the only person without a script. Teresa spotted Lily and smiled warmly. Food kept appearing like someone was refilling the world. There were trays of grilled chicken and sausage, a mountain of pasta, slick with oil and herbs, bread still warm enough to fog my glasses when I leaned in. Kids darted between chairs with sticky fingers, chased by laughing aunties who pretended to be mad. Someone pressed a plate into my hands before I could protest, and the first bite tasted like home I never had. I tried to memorize names, but everything moved fast. Every few minutes, another relative hugged Teresa and kissed Lily's forehead like it was normal. Laughter rose in waves, and I laughed too, despite everything today. Lily disappeared into the crowd like she had been waiting for it her whole life. Teresa kept her close but never caged her, letting her run to the fountain with 2 girls her age, then pulling her back to offer fruit and wipe her cheeks. I watched my daughter relax in a way I had not seen since before the divorce. Shoulders loose, eyes bright. At one point, Lily climbed into Teresa's lap, showing her a drawing she had made on the ride over, and Teresa held it like a treasure. I heard Lily testing the word nonna, shy and pleased. My chest burned with gratitude and fear of attachment. Dante stayed near without hovering, always close enough that I could find him with a glance. Never so close it looked like jealousy. Still, his presence shaped the air. When strangers drifted toward Lily, someone subtly redirected them. When a gate clicked, heads turned, then settled when Dante did not move. He introduced me around with a hand at my shoulder, brief and steady, as if I belonged beside him. I told myself it was manners, nothing more. But my skin kept noticing. I also noticed how relieved I felt, and that scared me. Protection felt sweet and dangerously easy. At the far end of the patio, Evan lingered in the shade, sober enough to stand, bitter enough to stare. He did not come close, but his eyes followed Lily, then Dante, as if comparing losses. I pretended not to see him, because I did not trust what grief could do in daylight. Later, while I carried empty plates toward the kitchen, I passed 2 men speaking low near a side door. I caught delayed shipment and the name Kravchenko, and my stomach turned. I kept walking. My hands were shaking, but I smiled anyway. On the drive home, Lily hummed to herself, full of sugar and sunshine, and I stared out the window like the glass could answer me. I wanted to believe it was just a loud family lunch, nothing deeper than grief and generosity. But the gates, the cameras, the way people listened to Dante, and that single name I overheard all sat in my throat. Family warmth is intoxicating when you have been lonely, and it is also how you get hurt. I decided to hold the good parts for Lily and leave the rest unspoken. Yet Teresa's birthday party was coming, and my camera would see what my heart tried to ignore. Very soon again. That night the mansion looked like it belonged to a different country. Floodlights washed the brick in soft gold, and the driveway filled with cars that glided in without music, like they didn't need to announce anything. I arrived with my camera case and my stomach already tight, telling myself I was here to work, nothing more. Marcus met us at the door, checked the street behind us before it closed, and led Lily and me inside as if we were precious cargo. Teresa had turned the sunroom into a candlelit dining space. Crystal caught the flame and tossed it back in tiny sparks. Flowers spilled over silver bowls, the kind you only see in magazines. I adjusted my settings and moved along the edges, smiling when people looked up, keeping my hands steady even when my mind wasn't. Through my viewfinder, I saw patterns before I named them. Men lingering near exits, clusters that broke and reformed when anyone unfamiliar passed, and conversations that softened when Dante drifted near, quietly listening. At the head table, Teresa kept Lily beside her, feeding her bites of pasta and laughing at her stories about kindergarten. Lily wore her butterfly dress again and looked like she belonged in the warm light. Every time my fear surged, I found her with my eyes and forced myself to breathe. Teresa's smile when Lily leaned into her shoulder was real, and I hated how much I wanted to trust that smile. Dinner rolled through courses I couldn't name, and I photographed hands lifting glasses, faces softening at toasts, Teresa's eyes shining in a way grief hadn't allowed in years. Then, while I repositioned near a hallway to catch a candid moment, I heard a low argument leak from an adjacent room. A man's voice mentioned the shipment being late. Another answered with something about the docks. And then the name Kravchenko landed in the air like a weight. My skin prickled. I kept walking, aimed my camera at the dessert tray, and pretended the word hadn't gone straight into my bones. After that, everything looked sharper. The laughter felt staged. The elegance felt like a costume. I kept shooting anyway because I had promised Teresa photos, and because Lily was still safe. I captured the cake, the candles, the way Teresa clasped her hands like she was wishing for time back. I worked through the finale while my mind replayed every gated camera, every sealed crate, every way Marcus never stopped watching. When the party thinned, Dante appeared at my side with that quiet gravity, and I knew he had noticed the change in me. He guided me away from the remaining guests into a small office with a closed door, a room that smelled like leather and cedar. I told myself to stay calm, to be polite, to make this clean. Inside my chest, panic paced like an animal. I explained, without quoting anything I'd heard, that I understood enough to leave. I would finish the job, deliver the edited gallery, and then Lily and I would disappear from his orbit. Dante listened without interrupting, his face unreadable. Then he laid out facts in that steady, merciless order of his. I had been in his home. I had photographed people who valued privacy. I knew where the gates were and how the staff moved. He didn't threaten me. He simply described the logic of a world where knowledge becomes leverage. What terrified me was that his logic made sense. He told me, in the same calm way, that refusing protection wouldn't remove the risk. It would only remove the shield. When I tried to insist we were not his responsibility, his gaze hardened, and I felt the word mine in the space between us, even though he didn't have to say it out loud. He also gave me the reason he hated saying. Years ago, a child in his family had died because of a war he could not stop. He carried it like a vow, like penance, and he had decided he would never let anyone under his protection be vulnerable again. Hearing that didn't make him safer. It made him human, and that was somehow worse, because it made me want to believe him. He walked me back to the foyer where my payment waited in a thick envelope. I didn't open it there, but I felt the weight and knew it held more than we agreed on. Tucked beside it was a plain card with only a phone number. No name, no business logo, just a direct line into him. Outside, Marcus had the car ready, and Teresa hugged Lily goodbye like she meant it. On the ride home, Lily fell asleep against my arm, warm and unaware. In my lap, the envelope pressed into my fingers like a seal, and the card felt like a key and a warning at the same time. I told myself this was the end, that tomorrow I would return to normal. But deep down, I already knew normal was something I might never afford again. For a couple of weeks after Teresa's party, I tried to shrink my world back down to the size I could manage. I edited photos at my kitchen table, answered client emails, and pretended the mansion was a strange dream I'd wake up from. When Teresa called, I let it ring until voicemail, then told myself I was being responsible, not rude. Lily asked why we weren't visiting Nana, and I blamed homework, weather, anything that didn't sound like fear. I kept Dante's plane card in the back of my wallet, where it pressed against my ID like a secret. Some nights I took it out just to prove it existed, then slid it back before I could do something reckless. Life was quieter, which should have felt like safety, but my body didn't believe in quiet anymore. Then the mail arrived on a Tuesday, and one plain white envelope changed the air in my apartment. The return address was a correctional facility upstate, and my fingers went numb before I even opened it. I hadn't heard Caleb Wright's name in months, not out loud, not in my own head, and still my throat closed. His handwriting looked too confident for someone behind bars, like the paper itself expected me to obey. He wrote that he would be released in 2 weeks, and that his family had hired attorneys to demand shared custody. There were lines about rights and blood, and how Lily belonged to him too, as if he had ever belonged to us. My hands shook so hard the page rattled, and all I could see was my daughter's face the day we left him. I sat on the floor with my back against the couch, breathing like I'd run a mile, trying not to scream. Lily was at kindergarten for 3 more hours, and those hours felt like a countdown I couldn't stop. I called legal aid first, the same office that once helped me file a restraining order, and got bounced from extension to extension. When I finally reached a tired voice, I could hear the script of limitations in her pauses. She explained that custody cases weren't their lane, and that I needed specialized representation, preferably yesterday. I asked about cost, already knowing the answer, and the number landed anyway, a $15,000 retainer, sometimes more. I thanked her like she had given me a gift instead of a wall, then called every referral she offered. Each call ended the same way, polite voices turning cooler when I couldn't promise money up front. By lunchtime, my voice was hoarse, and my hope was gone. At pickup, Lily climbed into the car chattering about finger paint and a classmate who traded crackers for stickers. I smiled on autopilot, nodding at the right moments, while my mind ran courtroom scenes like horror trailers. At home, I made boxed mac and cheese, cut apple slices, and listened to Lily talk about nothing and everything. Every laugh she gave me felt borrowed from the future Caleb wanted to steal. After bath time, Lily asked why my eyes looked tired, and I told her grown-ups got tired. That was all. I tucked her into bed, kissed her forehead, and stood in the doorway longer than usual, memorizing her breathing. When she finally fell asleep, I sat on the couch in the dark with my phone in my hand. I opened my wallet and stared at Dante's number as if it were a forbidden shortcut through a storm. I remembered $43 and the tow notice, the hot chocolate, the way he had solved problems like turning a key. I also remembered the gates, the cameras, and the heavy silence after he said protection wasn't optional. Calling him would mean admitting I couldn't fight Caleb alone, and admitting that pride was a luxury my daughter couldn't afford. My finger hovered over the call button until my hand started to cramp. Then I pressed it before fear could talk me out. He answered so quickly it felt like he had been awake in my pocket, waiting for my voice. I told him about the prison letter, the release date, the custody threat, and the lawyers who wouldn't listen without money. The words came out messy, and I hated that he heard me like that, raw and cornered. He didn't lecture or ask why I waited. He asked for my address, and the question sounded like a plan already moving. When I gave it, he told me to lock the door and open it for no one but him, then ended the call. I sat there listening to Lily's soft breathing down the hall, feeling shame and relief braid together inside me. Then I checked the lock twice, pulled the curtains, and waited, knowing the storm I tried to escape was coming straight to my door, and that nothing about our lives would stay simple. Headlights swept across my living room wall less than half an hour after I called. I hadn't even finished rinsing the mug I'd been holding like a shield. Marcus opened my building door downstairs before anyone could buzz, and a moment later Dante stood in my hallway, soaking the space with the kind of calm that makes panic feel childish. He didn't waste time asking how I was. His eyes went straight to the envelope on my coffee table, then to the closed bedroom door where Lily slept. When I handed him the letter, he read it once, jaw tightening just enough to show he was angry. Not loud angry, the kind that makes decisions. He moved through my apartment like he was measuring it for weaknesses. Window, fire escape, the thin lock I'd trusted for years. He wasn't judging me, but I still felt exposed, like my whole life was a bad hiding place. He signaled Marcus with a small tilt of his head, and Marcus stepped into the hall to make calls. I caught pieces of it in the silence, rotating shifts, unmarked presence, eyes on the street. My first instinct was to protest. Neighbors would notice. My landlord would ask questions. Lily's teacher would hear rumors. Then Dante's quiet certainty pressed over all of it, and I realized the truth I'd been dodging. Normal already left the building the day Caleb wrote my child's name like a claim. Dante told me, without telling me, that a legal fight could be won faster than fear could grow. He had a firm on retainer, people used to sensitive situations. I tried to say I couldn't accept that kind of help, but the words died in my throat because I'd already accepted it the moment I dialed his number. The next morning, I canceled a photo shoot and hated myself for it. Marcus drove me downtown, and the law office looked like glass and money, spotless and cold. 3 attorneys met us, sharp suits, sharper eyes. They didn't gasp at the prison letter or ask me to relive everything. They treated it like a file to dismantle. They explained how custody threats work when one side expects intimidation to do the job. They outlined motions, timelines, and the way documented history can outweigh family wealth if you push fast and clean. When the lead attorney mentioned $15,000, like it was a standard tool, not a mountain, my stomach flipped. Dante's presence in the corner made it clear the mountain wasn't mine to climb. Walking out, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Air. Real air. Relief didn't fix my past, but it let me stand up straighter in my own skin. Still, relief came with a shadow. The days that followed turned surreal. Marcus's people rotated so quietly I only noticed the small changes. A different car parked too long. A man reading on a bench who always looked up when I stepped outside. At first, it made me itch. Then it made me sleep. Dante visited with reasons. An update from the lawyers. A reminder about court paperwork. A quick check that the building felt secure. Then groceries appeared on my counter because Teresa insisted I was too thin, as if she could fix fear with pasta and oranges. Each visit was practical. But every visit also shifted the line between client and something else. Lily adored him. She would run to the window when Marcus's sedan arrived, cheeks bright, ponytail bouncing. Dante brought children's books with Italian words and pictures of castles, and Lily practiced sounds at the dinner table like it was a game. I watched my daughter become braver in a house of shadows, and it made my chest ache. I started replaying the café night in my head, not for romance, but for math. How fast he found my portfolio. How perfectly timed the advance was. How easily he slid into our emergency like he had planned for it. The thought that it might not have been an accident should have scared me more than it did. One Sunday, Teresa called again, voice warm and firm, and the message underneath it was clear. I wasn't being invited anymore. I was being claimed. When I hung up, I stared at Lily coloring at the table and realized I was losing the ability to pull away. Part of me wanted to fight it. Part of me was tired of fighting alone, and that was the most dangerous truth of all. That evening, Dante texted that Teresa wanted us for Sunday lunch again, and that he would pick Lily up from school one day this week. I didn't answer right away. I just watched Lily hum over her crayons and realized she trusted him completely. If I said no, I would break her new joy. If I said yes, I would step deeper into his world, willingly. After the custody letter, my life turned into checklists. Lock the door, pick up Lily, answer the lawyers, pretend I wasn't afraid. Dante's help worked, and that was the problem. Every time something got solved, a new part of my day belonged to his schedule. Even the quiet felt supervised. When he suggested gelato on a bright Saturday, my first instinct was to refuse. But Lily's face lit up, and I realized she deserved a day that didn't taste like stress. We drove to a small neighborhood shop, tucked between old brick buildings and a corner bakery. The bell over the door chimed, and cold, sweet air wrapped around us. Behind the glass, rows of color gleamed under lights. Lemon, pistachio, strawberry, chocolate, dark as coffee. Family photos filled the wall like proof that the place had history. Dante greeted the owner with an easy nod, like he'd come here long before he ever noticed me. Lily pressed her hands to the case, changing her mind every few seconds, taking the choice like it was serious business. I watched Dante crouch slightly, patient, letting her feel in charge. He ordered a sampler so she could taste more than one, and paid before I could argue. I didn't thank him out loud. I just swallowed the strange mix of relief and irritation, because I hated how natural it felt to let him handle things. Outside, we sat at a small metal table. Lily ate with total focus, spoon-tapping the cup as she tried to rank flavors like a judge. For a few minutes, I forgot court words and security rotations. I let the sun warm my face. I even laughed when Lily declared one scoop the color of happiness. The sound surprised me, like it came from an older version of me. Halfway through the second cup, Lily's eyelids began to sag. Children surrender to sleep without negotiating, and she did it right there, leaning into my side. Dante noticed first. He lifted her gently and she curled into his shoulder, trusting him the way she trusted bedtime. That trust tightened my chest. I wanted to protect it, and I was terrified of who I was trusting to protect it. Instead of heading straight back, Dante pulled into a small park nearby and shut off the engine. Trees framed the street, and late afternoon light softened everything outside the windshield. He watched Lily's breathing for a moment, then looked at me like he could feel the question building. The silence wasn't awkward. It was heavy, the kind that invites confession if you let it. I asked why he kept doing this. Not the practical reasons. Not the guilt stories he could offer. The real reason he had chosen a broke photographer and her kid in a storm and then kept choosing us afterward. Dante didn't answer quickly. His gaze stayed on the park, but his focus turned inward, like he was walking through rooms he kept locked. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter than I'd heard it before. He told me he had a younger sister, years ago, bright and stubborn, always insisting she was fine. He told me a rivalry his family couldn't dodge reached her anyway, and that losing her rewired everything. His father became protection turned into control. Trust shrank. Doors got thicker. Dante grew up promising he would never be too slow again, never be careless with people he loved. He didn't give me ugly details, but the grief lived in his pauses. I listened, and something in me softened, then stood up again. I understood guilt. I had lived with it since the day I left Caleb, wondering if I should have left sooner, if Lily would carry scars because I stayed too long. But guilt isn't a license. I told Dante that protection without consent becomes a cage, even when it's built from love. I told him he didn't get to own my choices just because he was afraid of failing again. And I admitted my hardest truth. Part of my fear was how safe I felt near him. The air between us felt charged with honesty. I leaned across the console and kissed him once, brief and steady, more promise than heat. He didn't push for more. He just held my gaze like he was trying to memorize the moment. The line between us shifted, and I knew I couldn't pretend this was only business anymore. After I pulled back, my pulse thudded in my ears, and I felt suddenly exposed, like I'd walked outside without a coat. Dante's hand lifted for a second, hovering near my cheek, then dropped as if he didn't trust himself. He looked relieved and troubled at once. I understood why. If he loved us, we became leverage. If I loved him, I stopped pretending I could leave clean and my body agreed. Lily stirred, and Dante eased her back into her seat and drove us home. At my building, the watchers blended into the street again. Dante's expression tightened as he told me, with a look, that he had urgent business tonight, something that couldn't wait for daylight. I nodded like I was brave. Upstairs, I tucked Lily in, then stared at my phone, realizing love doesn't erase enemies, it introduces you to them. And somewhere deep, I sensed the next storm was already moving. The afternoon after gelato felt almost normal. I was at my kitchen table, culling wedding shots and pretending the hum of my laptop could drown out everything else. Lily's backpack sat by the door, ready for tomorrow, and a half-folded load of laundry waited like proof of ordinary life. When my phone buzzed, I smiled without thinking, expecting a client. Then the screen flashed an unknown number. My fingers hovered, and my stomach tightened instantly. I opened it because mothers don't get to ignore surprises. A video file loaded, grainy and too still, and my breath stopped before the image finished sharpening. Lily sat in a bare room I didn't recognize, her curls messy, her eyes wide and wet. There was no blood, no visible injury, just fear so big it barely fit on her face. Under the video, text demanded 12 hours and something about Dante's ports right now. My hands went cold, then hot, then useless. I dropped the phone and snatched it back up like it might crawl away. All I could hear was my pulse, and all I could see was Lily trying to be brave. I called Dante before I could think of pride or consequences. He answered so fast it felt like he'd been waiting. His voice was controlled, and that control kept me from breaking apart on contact. He told me, without sounding like he was asking, to lock my door and stay put. I wanted to sprint to Lily's school, to anywhere that wasn't my living room, but Dante's certainty moved like a rope around my panic, pulling it tight. He said Marcus was already on his way, and I should bring nothing but myself. When the line went quiet, I stared at the hallway and prayed my knees would hold steady. Marcus arrived in 8 minutes, and time dissolved into headlights and door handles. I rushed downstairs so fast I nearly fell, and his calm face was the only solid thing in the storm inside me. We drove but smooth, cutting through Chicago traffic as if red lights were negotiable for him. At the Moretti gate, it opened before we slowed. Inside the mansion, men moved with purpose, and Dante's home had become a command center. The operations room looked like money spent on certainty. Monitors covered one wall with traffic feeds and grainy aerial views. A city map held colored pins and handwritten notes. Men spoke in clipped phrases I couldn't decode, yet every sound felt coordinated. Teresa stood in the corner with rosary beads, lips moving as if prayer could hold the ceiling up. Dante watched the video, froze a frame, and traced a window pattern with his finger. Someone pulled up warehouse listings, and Dante compared them to the background details: pipe rust, window angle, ceiling height. It wasn't magic, just obsession sharpened into skill. The demand gave 12 hours, but Dante acted like we had 12 minutes. When I tried to insist on going with them, he looked at me with kindness that said I would be a liability, and Lily needed me alive. I stayed, watching screens, nails in my palms. The feeds switched to moving cameras, and the room held its breath. I watched streets slide past, watched teams stack at doors, watched Dante move with the focus of a man who refuses to fail again. Commands came in brief bursts, then silence, then another burst. My body shook so hard, Teresa steadied my shoulder. I kept my eyes on the single heat dot marked Lily, praying it would stay where it was all night. A door opened on one screen, and my heart stopped. The camera tilted, showing a corner, a chair, and then Lily's face turning toward the light. She looked small and scared, but alive, and the sound that left me was more animal than human. I didn't hear what anyone said. I only saw Dante's hands reach for her with careful gentleness. The heat dot didn't vanish. It became my daughter again, breathing right in front. They moved fast after that, and the screens blurred into corridors and quick turns. I paced the foyer until my legs ached, counting breaths, listening for every car outside. When headlights swept across the windows, I ran before the door opened. Dante stepped out, Lily bundled against his chest, her arms reaching for me the moment she saw my face. I grabbed her and held her so tight she had to push back to breathe. Inside, Teresa wrapped a blanket around Lily's shoulders as if warmth could erase memory. Lily clung to me, trembling, and I whispered the same promise until my voice broke. A doctor arrived and confirmed she was shaken but physically okay. Dante stood a few steps away, watching like he didn't deserve to touch her. When our eyes met, his guilt hit me hard, and I understood this happened because of his world whether I wanted. On the drive back, I stared at Chicago lights and felt them differently, like every street had teeth. Lily fell asleep against my chest, and I stayed awake for both of us. Dante told me, in his quiet way, that we couldn't pretend this was over. I believed him, and that belief scared me more than the threat. Because if safety depended on him, what did safe even mean now, and could life be normal? That first night back in a real bed, I didn't sleep so much as listen. The guest room Teresa gave us was quiet, too quiet, and every small sound felt like a question. Lily stayed glued to my side, her fingers hooked in my shirt, as if fabric could keep the world from taking her again. I kept one hand on her back, feeling her breath rise and fall, counting it like a prayer. When the hallway light shifted under the door, my heart jumped. It was only a guard moving, a shadow passing, but my body didn't care about logic. Safe didn't feel safe yet. Safety was a word, and my nerves were living in a different language. Lily finally drifted off near midnight, then woke screaming around 2 a.m. She wasn't fully awake, just trapped in a loop of fear, insisting in broken whispers that the bad men would return. I held her, rocked her, and repeated that she was with me, that we were inside thick walls, that there were people outside the door whose only job was to keep her protected. She clung to my neck until her sobs turned to hiccups. Dante appeared without knocking, because in this house doors were more symbol than boundary. He stayed low and calm, so Lily didn't feel cornered. I watched my daughter's shoulders soften as his presence filled the room with certainty. He didn't promise fairy tales. He promised routines, guards in the hall, locked gates, lights on, and a plan for tomorrow. Lily believed him because she needed to, and I hated that belief and loved it at the same time. Morning came with the smell of coffee and something sweet on a skillet. Teresa moved through her kitchen like comfort was a skill she had mastered. Lily sat at the island, wrapped in an oversized sweater, nibbling pancakes as if she was testing whether normal still existed. She talked in short bursts, then went quiet, then talked again, processing the night in the blunt way children do. I let her speak. I let her stop. I tried not to flinch every time a car door closed outside. After breakfast, Dante asked me to follow him to his office. The request felt polite, but the meaning underneath it was firm. He laid out the reality as he saw it. My apartment was exposed. Our routines were known. And the people who had taken Lily were not the kind to forget a failure. I told him I wanted to go home anyway, that my life couldn't be permanently relocated like luggage. My voice shook, but the words were mine. He didn't argue with emotion. He argued with pictures my mind supplied too easily. Lily walking into school, me reaching for my keys in a dim hallway, the sound of footsteps behind us. He wasn't trying to scare me for fun. He was trying to make me accept the math. Then he offered solutions like he'd already built them. A private school with controlled access, a driver for drop-off and pickup, a studio space in the mansion so I could keep working, money for expenses, framed as compensation for the danger his world had dragged to my door. Each offer felt like a lifeline and a leash. I told him I didn't want to be owned. He watched me with that steady gaze, and I could feel how careful he was being, how hard it was for him not to turn control into command. He insisted he wasn't trying to take my choices, only keep me alive long enough to make them. I wanted to believe that. I also wanted the right to walk away. In the afternoon, Lily asked if we could stay another night. She didn't say why, but the way she glanced at the windows answered for her. I agreed, and the decision tasted like surrender. Later, Marcus walked me through the security routine like it was a bedtime story for adults. He showed me the lock on the guest room door, the keypad by the hallway, the camera feed on a small screen that only displayed our corridor. I nodded, pretending I understood, while my skin crawled at the idea of needing all of it. I texted my landlord with a vague excuse about a family emergency, then stared at my packed laundry bag on the floor, realizing I had left my whole life half-folded. Dante's world made safety feel engineered, and engineering always has a cost. That evening, Marcus came to the office with a tablet and a face that had gone all business. He pulled up security footage from the warehouse district, time-stamped hours before Lily disappeared. A figure crossed the frame, paused, and turned just enough for the camera to catch a profile. I felt the blood drain from my cheeks before my brain finished recognizing him. Evan. I watched the warehouse clip 3 times, hoping my eyes would correct themselves on the 4th. Evan's profile kept turning into Evan, and the room felt smaller each time. My stomach rolled like I'd swallowed the lake. Lily was upstairs with one of Teresa's housekeepers, safely distracted with crayons and cartoons, and I clung to that fact the way you cling to a railing in a storm. Down here, Dante didn't speak. He only stared at the paused frame, jaw tight, hands still, as if stillness was the only thing keeping him from exploding. Teresa walked in mid-sentence, saw Evan's face frozen on the screen, and went pale. Her denial arrived instantly, not loud, just desperate, like she could undo truth by refusing it. She kept insisting there had to be a mistake, that grief and alcohol made Evan careless but not cruel. I felt my own empathy for her struggle with my anger, because my child had been used like a tool. Dante's eyes stayed on his mother for a heartbeat. Then he turned away and gave Marcus a quiet order that made men move. They brought Evan in at dusk. He didn't arrive like a villain from a movie. He arrived like a man who had been losing a war inside his own body for years. His skin looked sallow under the foyer lights, his eyes red-rimmed, his clothes rumpled and stale with liquor. 2 guards kept a respectful distance that still said he was not leaving. Evan looked past them and found Dante, then found me, and his mouth twisted as if my presence proved something he hated. I didn't let myself imagine Lily hearing any of this, so I focused on Dante's posture and Teresa's trembling hands. Evan tried to justify what he'd done in slurred logic, blaming old tragedies, blaming Dante's choices, blaming the family for moving on. He framed Lily as a symbol, a substitute, a way to force Dante to taste helplessness. Every time he circled back to that idea, my vision narrowed. I could understand grief. I could not accept cruelty dressed up as grief. When I finally spoke, my voice surprised me with how steady it sounded. I didn't argue facts. I named the line he had crossed. A child is not a message. A child is not a weapon. I watched Evan's eyes flick toward the staircase, and I stepped slightly to block his view without thinking. Teresa made a small sound of pain, as if my words stabbed her too, and I hated that, but I could not soften the truth for her comfort. Dante's quiet was worse than shouting. He listened, then looked at Evan the way you look at a threat you've already decided to remove. Teresa broke then. She pleaded for one conversation, mother to son, before consequences. Her voice carried that impossible mix of love and disgust, and it cracked something in me. Dante held still for a long moment, then nodded once, the smallest concession that still cost him. The conversation happened behind closed doors, but the results walked out with Evan's hunched shoulders. Teresa's eyes were wet and resolute. Dante placed an envelope in Evan's hands and pointed him toward exile. Not death. A ticket. An address. Enough money for a short start, not a lifetime. The message was clear. Leave Chicago, stay away from this house, and do not come near Lily ever again. Evan looked at Teresa as if he wanted to be forgiven. Teresa didn't offer it. After he was gone, Teresa sat down like her bones had turned to sand. I sat beside her and held her hand, not because she deserved blame, but because pain doesn't care about guilt. She whispered about raising him, about missing what was wrong, and I wished I could give her an answer that wasn't cruel. Dante left the room to handle the fallout, shoulders rigid. I heard doors open and close, then nothing, like the house was swallowing grief whole. Later, Lily played in the garden with a puppy Teresa kept, laughing like the sun had never gone out. Marcus told me, in his calm way, that removing Evan lowered the risk, but it didn't erase it. The men who planned the kidnapping were scattered, not vanished, and the name Kravchenko still floated out there somewhere, angry and wounded. I watched the gate cameras blink and understood professionals never say gone. When I looked up, Dante was watching us from the terrace, and I felt the next move coming from beyond Chicago. Whatever came next would not care that we were trying to heal, and that scared me more tonight. 3 days after Evan left, the mansion settled into a strange calm. Lily started sleeping through the night again, and I started believing my own breaths. Then Marcus came in just after breakfast with a report that made Dante's shoulders lock. A rival tied to Kravchenko had been found dead in Prague, executed cleanly, and on the wall above him, someone had painted a crown over crossed daggers. Even I understood a calling card when I saw one. Dante explained, in the blunt way he used when facts mattered more than comfort, that the symbol belonged to the Lombardi family. Old school, patient, the kind of power that didn't hurry because it didn't need to. They weren't saving us out of kindness. They were announcing they had moved a piece off the board and wanted credit for it. If they killed Kravchenko's man, they could just as easily choose a new target next. Before I could ask what that meant for Lily and me, a courier arrived at the front gate with an envelope the color of bone and a wax seal pressed with the same crown and daggers. Teresa watched from the doorway, rosary beads tight in her hand, while Dante broke the seal like he'd done it 100 times in different wars. The card inside was polite in a way that wasn't polite at all. A meeting tonight at the Lombardi estate upstate to discuss cooperation and territorial arrangements. Dante's first instinct was to move us. He spoke about a safe house, a different set of walls, a different routine, as if distance could erase memory. I felt the old urge to run rise in me, the reflex that saved Lily and me from Caleb years ago. But running hadn't kept Lily from being taken. It hadn't kept strangers from learning her name. I told Dante as steadily as I could that Lily needed stability more than relocation. She needed to see that home could still mean something, even if home had guards outside the door. He looked at me like my stubbornness scared him, then like it gave him strength. I realized we were already in his world. The only choice left was whether I faced it alone, pretending I could separate myself from him, or whether we faced it together with clear boundaries and open eyes. I stayed. Lily stayed. Teresa nodded once, like she understood both fear and loyalty. That evening, Teresa and I made cookies with Lily at the kitchen island, flour dusting her cheeks, chocolate chips disappearing into her mouth when she thought we weren't looking. We watched a princess movie on the couch and let Lily fall asleep with her head in my lap, the way she used to before any of this started. I kept my phone beside me, screen up, waiting for the call that would tell me whether the world stayed standing. Near midnight, headlights swept the driveway and the front door opened. Dante walked in looking tired, but intact, and relief hit me so hard my knees went weak. He didn't celebrate. He simply let me see, in the set of his shoulders, that the meeting had ended without bloodshed. The Lombardis wanted an alliance, Europe for them, Chicago for him, and a shared promise that no one touched family without consequence. It wasn't peace, but it was a ceiling over our heads. Later, after Teresa went to bed, Dante and I stood in Lily's doorway and watched her sleep. Her curls spread across the pillow, her small hand curled under her cheek, unaware of the deals made for her safety. I thought about what safe meant now. Not a perfect world, just consistency, honesty, and the kind of love that shows up every day, even when it's messy. I won't pretend the danger vanished. Some nights I still flinch at sudden noises, and Lily still asks to double-check the locks. But now we name our fears, and we choose our people anyway on purpose. If you were me, would you run or would you stay and build something inside the danger? Tell me in the comments. And if you want to know what happens next, how we try to turn a fragile alliance into a real life, like the video, share it, and ask for part 2.